Oh, yes, we are live. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. My favorite, fiercest misfit. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, the way today's session is going to run is that we are going to have a lovely conversation and we are going to find out a little bit about you, and then we will get into the topic, which is fear of failure and success, two huge fears that a lot of us have. I've had both. So, so yes, I'm really looking forward to talking to you and learning from you. So why don't we start with who Anita is and what your story is?
Yeah. So I am so often I did an exercise with parole and I told my story and I went on for like 40 minutes. So I won't do that today. But what was really interesting about that is that I will often describe myself in terms of my job title. So I'm a project manager and I've been a project manager for over 10 years in railway and construction. And a lot of my stories were about that time. But but I really enjoyed doing the work with you, which looked much further back and looked at my whole story. And one of the things I learned, which was powerful learning, was I've always been a misfit. So I would often say, like, being a woman in a male dominated industry, even though there were other women around, there were lots of messages about how to be and how you need to behave in a certain way to fit in. But actually, it wasn't just when I started my career that I started feeling that misfit of not quite fitting in around here. And it does stem back. I'm the only girl in my house, other than my mum, but I've got two older brothers. And coming and growing up in an Indian fairly strict Asian family in the UK, there were lots of messages about how you need to be a certain way and how you need to behave. So a lot of my story, as it turned out, was about not quite fitting in around here. But I've been really lucky as well during that time to have been able to find communities where I do belong, and I've been able to get through all of those situations because I found friends, or ultimately friends, but or communities where I could go to and share what I was going through, that power of community, and not feel like I was a misfit in those spaces. And now I absolutely am about creating cultures where misfits don't have to change to fit in, but where they can belong for being themselves.
Wow. Wow, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I'm actually sharing my story tomorrow in a different group, and I am going to bring in my misfit and spin my story around it, and then yeah, so that's going to be the theme of my story as well.
That's so
Really, really
exciting.
interesting story there, considering yourself a misfit and finding out that you didn't feel that you belonged, and eventually you found places where you have started belonging. Brilliant, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it has been such a pleasure to be part of your journey, Anita.
Thank you. No, and I've learned so much having worked with you on finding my story, and also being able to confidently share it and share the parts of it I want to, because of course this you are very open to say we don't have to share everything, which is of course really important as well. And I recently gave a talk at an APM conference, which is Association for Project Management, and it was the talk for me. It was like my big goal to get there, and I knew I had that talk coming up when I worked with you, but I didn't know what I'd talk about. And I knew it would be the fierce mission, but it was how to shape it and frame it in a way that felt really me, but still felt appropriate for that audience. And I was really quite worried about it because it was a big deal. I built it up to be a really big deal for me. And then ultimately I could go and talk about embracing your misfit, which, do you know what, like at a proper professional conference, when the people were talking about spreadsheets and stakeholders, I was talking about misfits. I was like, yeah, I can just have fun, which was a huge thing that I learned from you as well. Just, you can just have fun. You don't have to be, even though I've got an important, powerful message, it doesn't always have to be serious.
Yeah. And the beauty is when we start having fun with what we are doing and how we are doing things, then we show up so much more powerfully, because then we don't get stuck in all those stressful stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your talk at the conference was a huge success. The talk of the conference, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I will say yes, but I haven't seen all the conference talkers. But yeah, that was some of the feedback I got, and I think it was probably the most engaged session, where, because I invited people to get involved in the comments as we went along, I think it was the one that most people got involved. And I talk about being a misfit, and I didn't feel like I fitted in around here. And one of the questions I asked during the presentation was like, "Is it just me? I don't think it is." And like, so everybody was like, "It's not just you. It's not just you." And that's, I think, when we talk as well.
Yeah.
And when I share my Project Misfit stories, it's like people are like, "Oh, it's not just me who went through that or went through a similar experience." I think it's quite universal, particularly if you're a woman of colour. Any other type of misfit, then kind of society teaches us we don't fit in.
Yeah.
But I do think that applies to men as well, because men get a lot of messages about fitting in, and we had some of those conversations in one of the sessions we had, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that's the power of story, because when we share our story and a personal story, it initiates conversations. And people find threads of their own stories in our stories, which I think is a very, very powerful position to be in. Definitely more interesting than talking about spreadsheets, I would say. Well done. Really, really well done. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Now let's talk a little bit about the topic that you have chosen for today, which is fear of failure and success. So why talk about the fear of failure and success when you could talk about anything under the sun today?
And this is what I'm thinking, like, why did I pick, like, even the misfit stories, when I'm sharing them, I'm like, why am I talking about all this personal, vulnerable stuff? But it's that very thing of, is it just me? And I know it's not just me. So it's, again, that power of sharing. And for me, a big theme of my story is about being a misfit, not quite fitting in around here, but it's also been around, and perhaps there's a bit of a link here, but it's also been around holding myself back and not taking the risk. I mean, I do sometimes. I've got a mix of being a bit impulsive, but often overthinking, not taking the risks, keeping myself smaller than I could be. And part of that, I think, is related to that, the messages of how you should be to fit in. So therefore, I was scared of failing, which I knew, but it's really come to home with some of the stories that I've kind of been reflecting on. And then certainly starting my own business, making those leaps and those risks to take myself up to the next level, I've kind of felt a few times that I've hit my upper limit, and had to break through that. And for me, that was also the fear of not just if this doesn't work, but what if this does work? What will that mean? And it seems crazy to talk about the fear of success, because like, why would you? Surely that's what you want. Like, you've got a vision board, which I've created this year, and you want to be talking at the APM conference, and you want more clients, and you want to make a really big impact, and you want to deliver your mission and your message. So why would you be scared of succeeding? And then I realized I was. So that's why I chose to bring it to the table today.
So tell us a little bit more about this fear of success. But before you delve into it, let me share with you that we have a live audience here. So Birdie has joined us from Michigan, USA, and
Hi,
Esther
Birdie.
is here.
Hiya.
And Carolyn from Singapore.
Brilliant. And Carolyn is coming on the Risky Thing game show later, so I'm really excited.
Yay! Birdie has a very interesting message here. She says, let's take the message seriously and ourselves lightly. I think that's beautifully articulated. Thank you, Birdie. And she also says she agrees with my comment about spreadsheets. She isn't sure how spreadsheets could ever be that interesting. And Carolyn, who specializes, well, one of her many things is helping people with fears. And she says the fear of success is super real. So let's hear a little bit more about what was really going on as far as the fear of success is concerned. Because from what I know about you, Anita, you were always that high achiever in your life. How can somebody be who has always achieved so much be scared of success? Give us some insight.
Yeah, so I think they're probably linked. So I've shared with you before that at school I did really well, and so I was a straight A student, and from a young age, like in where I am, there's like an IQ test pretty much to get into grammar school, and I passed mine, but I actually had to pass it twice, two different tests because we moved. So I was like, it was the anomaly of the family because nobody had got into grammar school before, and this is from my bigger extended family, which is huge, humongous. So it was like the first one into grammar school, and then I was getting straight A's. But then with that came a lot of attention and a lot of pressure to perform, and so there was a fear of not performing then, I guess, and in things that I wasn't good at, then I just was like, no, I'm not even going to go there. So sports day, I pulled a sickie, so I didn't have to go because I was like, I'm going to embarrass myself because my name's been put down for high jump. No idea. But those are the things I said, oh, I don't care about them, but I don't want to fail at them, so I'm just going to not try. And I did once get a D, and that was for my maths AS level, but I was able to say to myself, well, you didn't try, Anita, because you decided that wasn't important because it was a bit hard. And it clashed with my psychology exam. So I'd made a rational decision because I knew I was going to carry on psychology. So I knew that, so I was like, oh, it doesn't matter that I got a D because I didn't try. So it's not a reflection of me. But the fear of success, I guess I didn't ever really think about that until I started my business, and that was when I started to become aware of it. But I mean, it could have come into play before that because I did put myself out there for a promotion as a project manager, and I got told I wasn't ready yet. Yeah, I felt I was ready, and I felt I was showing the leadership skills, but I allowed that message to kind of knock me not off the course that I said I wanted, which was going for the next position. And I ended up making meaningful career steps, but sideways and not putting myself out there. And part of that was, well, you might get rejected, but part of that was also, well, actually, what happens if you get it? Do you actually really want it? Does that come with extra work and extra pressure, extra scrutiny? And so I chose not to go there, even though I would say I felt that I was ready. And then certainly in my business, that fear of success has come up so many times. So that could be about not putting myself out there for opportunities, or if I've got an opportunity, self-sabotaging, which again is crazy. I got invited to write for a blog, which I really wanted to do, and then I missed the deadline. And I was like, well, that's self-sabotaging behavior. Like, I've said I wanted to do it, and I could have prioritized it higher, but a big thing was actually the self-doubt creeping in. And would that blog be good enough because I've put it a bit on a pedestal, the same as I had with the APM conference. Like, that could have, because for me that was a big deal, that I was worried about it. So therefore I was worried about whether I could do it, and so I avoided it until I absolutely had to do it. And for me as well, that has meant putting myself out there to get more clients and all different types of things, because it's like, well, if I do reach the next level of success, it's the consequences of that. Like, will that mean I've got to prove to myself? And I've had over the last, particularly the first year of my business, like massive imposter syndrome that's crept in, and have to demonstrate that I can deliver on my stuff, which has changed with hearing the amazing feedback I do get. So that's helped me break through that. But then there were also stories that I was creating about, well, will I have time to take on more clients, and what will that mean? Would I, because I've suffered burnout in my career before, like, will that mean I'll burn out again? Will it mean, what would the knock-on impacts be? So even though on one hand I was saying I want to be successful, I want to do all these things, I was either self-sabotaging or avoiding these risks because either they wouldn't work or they would work, and there'd be consequences either way.
Yeah. A lot of what you said resonates so much with me, because I'm also somebody who used to work in the corporate and then set up my own business. And in the beginning, I had this huge story running through my head that said, I'm not an entrepreneur. And I stayed stuck in that space for so long. And this is the space when we are trying to understand the market, we are trying to find our feet, really. And eventually, what really helped me move forward was realizing that you're not an entrepreneur because you have never done this before. So it's amazing the kind of BS stories that we can give ourselves and get in our own way. My fear of success was very similar to one of the stories that you shared, the knockout, burnout impact. After I recovered from cancer, I set up my own business. And whenever I would be in a situation wherein I would have potential to get many clients, I would actually get scared. What if I work really hard, long hours, and make myself ill? And it took a while to understand that, because the fear was not about taking on new clients or wanting that business success. The fear was fear of getting sick again, which is it was almost masked under so many layers that it took a while to unpack. So what you're saying really, really resonates with me.
Yeah, it's really powerful, because I think that's really interesting, because there are often other things that are going on which we find through the power of story. So yeah, the work that you do is incredibly powerful for uncovering that.
Thank you. We also have Jill, who's joining us from Wales. So welcome, Jill. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about how did you break through these fears? What was the work that you did? Because I think that's where the real gold is.
Yeah, so it was taking the risks of actually putting myself out there and then following through with that, and then getting the feedback. And so that for me has been really powerful, of asking those questions and getting the feedback and acknowledging it, to know that I am making an impact. So the way I now frame it, and this is what I've talked to other people about as well who work for me, and I've had a few sessions with people that are scared of selling, but then when we look at the impact of the work they do, they are blown away about how powerful the work is. And then when you frame it like that, it's a disservice not to tell people about it and not to invite people to work with you. So for me, it was that massive reframe. It's just, you're inviting people to work with you, and they can choose to do that or not, but it can have a real big impact. So for me, massive, and it related to what you said, is like, if you can't be an entrepreneur if you're not leading by having a business and having clients. So it was actually having to put yourself out there to create the evidence. And then once I started creating that evidence and hearing it and listening to it, it's like, okay, so what I'm doing is having a big impact. So now I can start acknowledging that and put that out there as well. And so, yeah, a huge part has been about finding my story and finding different ways to lead the same mission, but using different parts of my leadership to do that, and listening to my energy as well, because there are times when I want to go and hide, but it's still learning to do this. But it's like framing, okay, when are you going to launch? Because I can learn a lesson from that. Perhaps I don't launch exactly when my period is starting, because that can have a really big impact. But I make a point of still showing up every day, in some way, and like even a small way, but it's just one more step, and every step builds on each other, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
the consistency. And so through my new program that I'm launching, the group experience is all about taking risks, and it's, for me, that's just been a huge exercise in putting myself out there in a different way, and just massively having fun with it. And if people want to join, it's great, and if not, then it's not for them, or not for them right now. And just having that, like, that less pressure on it. But again, it's like just being able to do something differently, and that's been a great fun. And it's been a risk, hugely, but that is where the beauty comes in, isn't it? That's where we can do things differently, and we can create impact just by doing things differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love what you said about inviting people into conversations to work with us. This is a concept that I had learned many years ago from somebody called as Doreen Virtue. And I heard her say on one of her YouTube videos that if you don't share your gift with the world, you are doing not only a disservice to yourself, but also to others. And that really, really stayed with me. And I said, that makes a lot of sense. If I don't show up, if I don't share my gift, I'm not doing anyone any good. And I think that's one reason why I'm so okay with people making sales pitches at me, because I agree there are bad ways and there are better ways to do that. But essentially, what they are trying to do is share their gift with someone else. So yeah.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yes, yes. I do mind when people would say, "This is my gift to you," and I want to coach you. I typically get them on birthday. Happy
Yeah.
birthday.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, wasn't it? Like,
Those ones are creepy.
it's when it's disingenuous. I think that's it. It's like when people come into your inbox and like, and you just don't know them from anyone, and they're like, how are you at this time, and what's your family going through? And you're like, you don't know me, and you're asking me all these personal questions as if you really care, and then I know you're going to sell me something. So it's like, be genuine. If anything, just be genuine.
Yeah, yeah. Birdie here says, creating impact by doing things differently. Love this, Anita. So what you're saying, you're not the only one, Anita. A lot of us fall in the same category. We have our own different fears of failure, fear of success, and other fears. So tell us more about this misfit thing that you are doing, and this risk project that you're working on.
Yeah, so the risk project is simply, it's called The Risky Thing, and the goal is to invite 100 people that are ready to take a risk. And it's a mix of some real maverick risk takers who have leapt in without even knowing what they signed up for. They're like, yeah, I'm in. Like I said, I'm looking for 100 risk takers. They're like, I'm in. I don't care what it is, I'm in. And to people like me who can be afraid and frightened. But the idea is, I just think that would be an amazing power of 100 people together taking risks, or a large collective of people that are ready to do that. But the power is that it's going to be a really supportive, compassionate community, but also where you get firm accountability. And you can come and you can share those wobbles and those worries, and you can be celebrated for taking the risk itself. So whatever the outcome, whether you are going to fly or whether you're going to fail, that is all good. That's all good because you've taken the risk. And we've been speaking about the fear of failure, but actually it's a really powerful thing to be able to give yourself permission to fail. And if it doesn't work, then what can you do, and what can you learn from? And actually knowing that you can fail means you can fail again, and it means that you can take another risk and fail again to ultimately take the risk that will set you free and you will fly. So it's going to be an amazing community, and we start next week, and we're going to be together in a group experience over 3 weeks, and the goal is really to take the risks that you have been afraid to do, but that you are in a community where you are supported through your fears to take that risk. Yeah, so I'm excited. And I mentioned that so my launch for this has just been not the normal launch that I would do, which is like, here is everything, and then people sign up. It's been creating lots of intrigue and curiosity, and people have been signing up because they're like, oh, I'm just so curious, I just want to know what this is. And so that's been massively fun, and it's just allowed me to have more fun with it. And today we've got a game show which is happening after this at 3:30 on the Fierce Project Management page, and Carolyn is going to be a contestant, and it's just, again, just having fun with it. So we're just going to have the risky thing game show. There'll be some risky thing questions, and then spinning the wheel, which is deciding the price you pay. There's an option for the people that are less risk takers to choose the safe price, which is kind of £99, which is in the middle of the wheel, and there is no shame in choosing the safe price either, but there's also the option to spin the wheel and just see where it lands. And for me, that's been a massive risk, but it just also has taken the pressure off, because it's like, it lands where it lands, and then you can choose whether that's a price you want to pay or not.
Yeah. And just before somebody would reach out for that wheel, before they spin it, they would be able to gauge what their risk-taking barometer is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you can, yeah, exactly, you can decide what's okay for you, whether you even want to spin the wheel. So there have been a couple of people that have said, I'm spinning the wheel, but I'm really afraid. And there have been some people that are like, this is why I need the program, because I'm not prepared to take the risk to spin a wheel, but I will pay the safe bet price, and then I'm going to get more confident with risk taking as we're in that process together.
Absolutely. Jill has a question for you, and she's asking, how do you define risk?
So I'm a project manager as well, so I have like proper formal definitions, because part of my job was managing risks and opportunities. So risk is just an uncertainty, it's an unknown, and you can have unknown unknowns, the things that you absolutely just couldn't predict, and then you can have the things, we call them known unknowns, which sounds really hard to say, but the things that you can prepare for, you don't know if it's going to happen or not, but you can start preparing for, and you can make the risk mitigations for, or you can avoid risks, and you've got different ways of handling that. But just because it's an uncertainty means that risk can be an opportunity as well. And I asked a question yesterday, is a risk by another name, and in my head I'm like, risk by another name is an opportunity, but I just loved what that threw out, like what people were saying, well, it's a gamble, it's chance, it's every day. I'm like, oh, I've not thought about it in those terms before. So I think that's the beauty with language is, and with the word risk is, what does it mean to you? To each of us it will mean something slightly different.
Yeah. I'd read somewhere, I'm just reminded of this quote, I'm paraphrasing it, I can't even remember who said it, but it was something on lines of, when nothing is certain, everything is possible.
That's beautiful. I'm definitely going to borrow that later.
Oh yes, take it right away.
And I think that's the thing, like we talk about the pandemic that we're in, and I think if one thing we do know for certain is that there is very little that is within our real control, and that we can predict. Like, I'm pretty sure none of us saw that this was coming this time last year.
Yeah.
So actually, what are the risks that and I think a lot of us are probably really tired of taking what used to be everyday things that are now a risk, like going to the shops is now a risk. Yeah. So, in some way our risk tolerance is like really hammered, because everything's risky now, but also actually it's about taking the risks you want to, and taking them more in your more in your gift. So rather than the risks we don't want to take, it's the risks you do actually want to take.
Mm. Yes, yes. We also have Emma last, who has joined us. Welcome, Emma.
Hi, Emma.
Jill is saying, I understand the IT risk, life itself is risk though. What would you comment on that, Anita?
That life itself is risk. Yeah, absolutely. So Kirsty put a comment that risk is every day. I'm like, oh gosh, that's just wisdom. And this is wisdom as well, because life itself is risk, isn't it? It is, like, everything is uncertain. And like we don't know what's around the corner, and this thing of like not wasting the time that we do have. So everything is uncertain. So, and this is the other side of this, doing nothing is a risk as well. Like, you could choose to do nothing, you can choose not to take the opportunity or to take the risks that you see, but doing nothing is a risk as well. So what's the outcome and the consequences of not making that move? There will be consequences of that as well. So it's let's take the risks we actually want to and consciously choose and know, even though we don't know the exact consequences, we can take those things that are a bit more in our gift and that we actually want.
Yep. I second that completely. And it is really important to be careful about how some of those risks, what we see as risks, are really hidden in the stories that we tell ourselves. And that is why I always like to say, people don't believe everything that your head tells you.
That's
a lot
true.
of it,
Because
a lot of
naturally
it
we're risk
is,
averse, aren't we?
yes.
Like, naturally our brains want us to play safe. They don't want us, like, and our family very often, our loved ones around us, they want the best for us, so they'll be like, play it safe, don't do that thing because we're worried for you. But that's not always the best thing for us.
Yeah. And what was good once may have changed now, because we have changed, our life has changed, circumstances have changed.
Yeah, that's, again, just throwing all the powerful wisdom at me. That's just so powerful. And I just think this pandemic has shown us that again, and any life event that we go through it just brings that message home.
Yeah. Oh, I'm reminded of this beautiful anecdote that I had read. Let me check with you. Have you heard what Louise Hay said about breathing?
No.
So Louise Hay said that the biggest leap of faith, again, I'm paraphrasing her, the biggest leap of faith that you can take in life is letting out a breath. Because once we exhale, we don't know if there is air available to inhale the next one. And if we don't inhale, we are just going to die.
Goodness me.
And her question to the audience, the invitation was, when we can take that risk every couple of seconds or every second or whatever the cycle is, then why can't we just do whatever we want to do in life?
Yeah. God, when you think everything is a risk, then you can, even taking a breath is a risk, then it just opens up so many possibilities, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think in that moment, everything becomes possible.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So tell us, what next about this Misfit project, the Risky Thing project? You're going to have the spin in the wheel, and what can people expect, or do they have to be there to find out in real time?
So today in an hour's time, we're going to have the Risky Thing game show. So it's just going to be fun, and you can watch it back if you don't make it. But it is just really simple, and it's just a game show about risk. And there's an option to spin the wheel there for the contestants. And if anybody wants to join in the comments and wants to spin the wheel, then they can let me know in the comments and we'll spin it for you without you having to come on live, if that's a risk that you don't want to take. So that's today, and then but the cart is still open to join the risky thing this week until Sunday, because we kick off on Monday. And I will, whether we repeat the game show, I don't know, but if people choose to spin the wheel, I will do that for them on Sunday, probably live as well. And we might even repeat the game show, but yeah, it's just fun. But the actual risky thing experience starts next week, and I've promised fun, and as well as the fear and freedom and failing and flying, there will be fun. So there will be some surprises thrown in, because I think that's going to be essential, because all these risk takers that have signed up are expecting surprises. So yeah, there will be. So yeah, just but for me, it's about the power of community and what that can really unleash. Because when we're like, if you're a business owner, or you're a misfit in your industry, or whatever it is, it can feel lonely, and it can feel quite scary to then take a risk, when you don't have a support network around you necessarily, or a support network that gets it. Because we've kind of already touched on that sometimes people that we're surrounded with want us to be safe. So not that we don't want you to be safe. So I'm from a railway background, so physical safety is always number one. But then after that, we can take a risk. So, but having a community that are going to encourage you to stretch out of your comfort zone and do those things that are risky for you. And I think we've kind of touched on it, but of course, a risk for me is a different risk for you. Like, there are some things that you're really comfortable with that would still be a risk for me. And that will be the same for all of us. So our risks are not the same, but the power of community and support that is there will be incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And I do want to emphasize on the point of safety that you have brought up, because you'll be doing it with Anita. You will be in safe hands. I know that for sure. So if you're sitting on the fence, remember what Anita said. Sitting on the fence, not taking an action is a very clear action. It's a very clear decision. So people, if you're sitting on the fence, just jump in. Play the game.
Play the game. Exactly. It's all a game. It's all chance. So, and particularly spinning the wheel, like, what have you got to lose? Just spin the wheel. You don't have to go in if you don't like the number it comes up with. So yeah, and I think this is, so we spoke about, I've called you very unscary earlier this week, and I said, actually, it turns out that I am scary. So, and that's because when people, because of fierce project management, sometimes people will come on a call with me, like if it's a one-off call, and they're like, I'm scared, or when they've signed up to the risky thing, and they're like, whatever option they've chosen, or and not being entirely clear on what to expect from the process. They're like, I'm scared, but this is, even though I am fierce, then that means that I will ask the hard questions, and we'll get to some of those stories that we all have, that are individual to ourselves, but that we have that are masking sometimes what's going on. I ask those questions, and we get to the scary stuff from a really kind, compassionate and empathetic place. So it's not going to be entirely scary, because you won't be on your own. And my part of my superpower and my gift is building communities where misfits belong, and that are compassionate and safe, but also firm and challenging as well. So that you get both sides of that.
Yeah. What feels scary when we are walking alone can feel completely unscary if we have somebody who we can navigate that path with. And I think that's the power of working with somebody. That's the power of being held and supported and being part of a community, which is exactly what you provide.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. And it can be quite lonely when you're out on your own for whatever reason. And if you're in lockdown, then that's another added kind of isolation. So it can be really lonely, but actually, or it can be scary. But when you've got the power of a support network who gets it and gets you, then really, I think the possibilities that were opened up are huge.
Yeah. And I would disagree with the adjective scary that some people have used for you. I
I don't know if they
disagree.
called me scary, but they've said working with me might be scary.
Well, then
That's
it's
before
not
they
you.
work with me. That's before they work with me.
Yes, yes. Yes, that is true. Yeah, I completely hear you when you talk about being a misfit in the family and feeling lonely. In my family, I'm the only one who has my own business. That's one. And coaching, my family still doesn't remember that what I do is coaching. They would introduce me and talk to me and tell people that I run a consulting organization in London. Nope, complete misfit.
Oh, they're close. Not quite there though, are they?
Not quite there, but that's about being different. That's about being a misfit, or actually being a misfit and taking that risk. And that's what I would say most of the people who are here listening to us live and would catch up the replay would be doing.
Yeah, hugely. I think so one of the great questions that was on when I did my presentation was like, if we're all misfits, who are the fits? And I was like, oh, that's a really good question, because I think most of us at some point, some situation, we feel that misfit. So I think I think it's probably universal in many ways.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. If everybody's a misfit, then does it not mean that all of us belong together in one way or the other?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the goal. And for me, I think that's the power of it. And that's what Fierce is all about. It's about embracing the difference. But in some environments and in some cultures, certainly it can't, day to day, it doesn't always feel like that misfit is embraced.
That is true. We have Jace here who has joined us from Bromley, and she says it depends who deems another as a misfit. And that is true. That is true. Depends which lens we are looking through.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I shared in my presentation was like all the different labels that I have and I give myself. And some of them I don't even think about or give myself because they are just typical, they're just normal around here. So I don't talk about being cisgendered, and I don't talk about being neurotypical, and I don't even think about it because that's just normal around here. Whereas some of my labels in some environments, I'll be like, oh, I'm the odd one out for whatever reason. And so I think we all have at times that misfit and that fit, or that kind of typical, but actually the beauty is that we are, of course, more than any of our labels, but that they are part of us, and that we and when we embrace difference, we acknowledge that some people are not the typical for whatever reason, but that is actually what the beauty is, because how boring would it be if we all did fit in, and even if we've got different labels, but that you have to behave a certain way to fit in, you lose the power of difference. So, and I think that's incredibly boring.
Yes, it would be. Yeah, they would all be clones of each other. Jill has a very interesting point to make. She says everyone will be a misfit somewhere. I think that's powerful. And Jade says one person's misfit is another person's champion. Wow, I love that.
I love that. Yeah, incredibly powerful. Yeah, I love that.
There's a difference between a conformist versus radical thinking mindset. Oh, do you want to comment on that, Anita?
Oh, yeah, I guess, yeah. So I have this, I mean, I have this thing, like one of my real thing that really annoys me is the phrase of well, this is how we've always done it around here. And I would just face that so often in my project management career. But then on one hand, I'd be told, we really embrace change and we want to make things better. We want to make things efficient. But then as soon as you had an idea they were like, yeah, but you can't change that. Like, you can change anything, but you can't change that because that's how we do things around here. And you're like, oh, face palm, like, oh. And it was just so infuriating. And I've just got this, yeah. And so I learned a new word over the course of this year, which was, which just really fit the bill for me. And that word was about being a dissenter. And it was compared to being I can't remember the other words, but being a dissenter was somebody who wanted to feel like they were heard. So if they had their ideas and their opinions to make things better, they really wanted to be heard. But they also wanted to belong. Whereas, so the other two words were, one was an adversary, I think, who just wanted to be heard. So they didn't care about the fallout of that, but they had opinions, they would share them, and whether that annoyed people, that was beside the point. And the other word was a colluder, who essentially kind of went along with things because they had such a powerful need for belonging, that they would sacrifice that need to be heard. And for me, that just kind of really like hammered it home. So for me, I don't know if so for me, it's like, well, actually, I think that idea that actually aren't we all just trying to do things better, but actually that there are different ways of doing it, and the power of both of those for me was the reason, again, of why I felt that misfit, because I was kind of pushing up against the edge of conformists, who were used to doing things in a certain way, even though they were saying, oh, we want to be more radical. But and so again, it's about the culture and the environments, and what leaders create in those spaces.
Yeah. Would you say that most leaders are dissenters?
I think it's all about finding your style, and I think there's a place for all of those, but it's all going to be about the context and where that is best. So there are times when it's not the best thing to be a dissenter, because in some environments you'll keep butting your head against everybody else because you're trying to do things better or in a different way, and that's not always the right way to do things. But I think in some organisations and corporate cultures, you get surrounded by lots of yes men. So it's just about finding. I do think to lead, and particularly to lead in where we are now, that we do need the leaders that are going to push the boundaries and push the envelopes of how we do things. And you can see that at all levels when we go into politics and when we go into corporates, and as individual leaders ourselves. It's like, how can we push ourselves to be, even if we're not naturally radical, we don't have to be fully radical, but let's try and do things a different way. And you see it in leadership, that you do get some people that are like, we have to do things a certain way because that's what's expected of us, or we have allies like that we need to, or stakeholders that we need to meet their expectations. So I'm not saying lose those elements, because sometimes they're really important as well. So it's about finding that balance of not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but finding the balance of taking those risks but not losing the stuff that is good.
Yeah, finding that balance, I think that's the key. You mentioned a very interesting word when you were explaining leadership in context of taking risks, and that is politics. Why don't you tell our audience about what role you are playing in the politics in the UK?
Well, you've made it sound very big.
It is big.
So I do have an interest in politics, and I'm kind of watching my words, because I was like, I get really like quite irate about the state of politics. So and in the world, like, we can see what's going on in America, and just so much unrest, and I stand very strongly against some of the things that are happening, and some of the way our leaders are treating the people. My role on it is like standing up for what I believe in, and I, like, for a long time I was a keyboard warrior. I would be like, I'm so angry about this, and typing it, and I'm like, oh, that's not really making a difference in the way that I want it to, because we're all in our echo bubbles, echo chambers, and our bubbles where you're only talking to people who think like you. which is a real challenge. So I'm working to try and bridge those divides, which can be hard, but still be really passionate about what I believe in, but to try and reach out to understand other points of view. And I say potentially because everything got put on hold because of lockdown, but I'm potentially running in our local politics in Gravesend in Kent, where I am. And that happened because I was invited because they were looking for so I'm in the Labour Party. They were looking for a woman to run as a candidate. So it was going to be an all woman shortlist, and I got approached, being a woman in the party who lived in that area, to whether I would consider it. And I went to a council meeting, and I just looked around the room, and there was some diversity in terms of there being women there, and there was some diversity in there terms of people being from different races. And mainly it was white, or it was Indian Sikh men, which is really high in my community. It's really high Indian Sikh population. But then I looked around the room and I thought, well, nobody is quite representing me. There isn't any women of colour here, and that's often what I talk about, and what I talk to the people I work with in corporate about, project managers, of, well, if nobody's like you, it doesn't mean that you couldn't be the first and be the trailblazer and set that path for other people to follow you, because that's incredibly powerful. And it turned out there was one other person who happened to be on holiday that day. But again, when I found that out, is actually she would be from the Tory party, which doesn't align with my values. So I was like, well, that doesn't represent me either. I'm not saying those other people couldn't represent people, not like them, but I think there was just a huge hole that there were no women of colour around that table making decisions about what's best for that community. And I mean, there are lots of people and lots of misfits that aren't represented around that table, but I was like, well, that's one way I could make a difference. And it seemed incredibly scary and a big risk. And but just thinking about that, this is what I tell women to do, and I support them to get into leadership positions and be the decision makers and have a voice around the table. It seemed really appropriate then that I would role model that myself.
Brilliant. Hopefully when the lockdown goes away, this would move forward.
Yeah, so I mean, I really haven't heard anything again, so I expect it will do at some point, but as we're potentially going into another lockdown, it might be into next year now. But it's been just an interesting experience, even just to put myself forward for that element, and then just see where it goes to. So yeah, it's all a risk and stretching out of my comfort zone, but I think for something that I really am passionate about and believe in, so I think that is a risk worth taking.
It is indeed. And I would say putting yourself out there was a big thing, because so many of us would not muster the courage to put ourselves out there, or to really believe that one person can make a difference. So
yeah,
well done.
I think absolutely one person can make a difference, because all the people, there's a great quote, and I think it's by Margaret Mead, and again, I'm going to paraphrase now because I don't know it word for word, but it's never underestimate the power of a small committed group of people to make a difference, because that is all that ever has. And that gets me every time. It's like, of course, yeah. It just takes one, and then building a small group.
That's exactly what you're creating today. Oh, brilliant. If there is one message you would like to share with our audience, what would it be, Anita?
You've had so many amazing ones today, and so it has to be about risk taking, and I think it's just about facing the fear of what could happen, and not so just trying to think of what's come into my head is the Dr. Pepper advert of what's the worst that could happen, and I love those adverts because they were just really silly, and you think about the worst that could happen, and it could be very big, and it could be catastrophic, but realistically the likelihood of that happening on the whatever risk that you're thinking about is probably not as great as you're making out in your head. And those adverts were just incredibly silly. So I think that kind of brings home that often our thought process, if you were to rationalize it, you'd be like, and you kind of add all these extra layers on what could happen, these stories that you create. And if you were to really look at it, if you looked at it, you'd be like, oh no, that's just me being a bit silly. So I'm not trying to underestimate people's fears or anything like that, but yeah, just think about what the worst that could happen and what if you did take that risk.
I love that. What is the worst that can happen? And if I find myself stuck somewhere really, really bad, this is the question. This is my go-to question. Mm-hmm. What's the worst that can happen? I learned it when I was going through coaching after cancer, and it was hugely powerful in helping me rebuild my life after cancer. So yes, this question is really powerful, people.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I love what you've created. So we're very grateful that you've ended up here.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too. Anita, how can people get in touch with you?
So I'm over on Facebook and I'm over on LinkedIn, and you can drop me a message. I'll put my details in the comments. And if you're happy, I can share the link to the risky thing. Brilliant. And
under this video, please share all your links.
Brilliant. I'll share it here. Yeah, I've got a link tree. I can share that. So I'll share my links here, and hope to see you in about half an hour over on the Fierce Project Management page, and come watch a game show. Yes.
Anita, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. It was a minefield of risky fun.
Oh, I really loved it. Thank you, Parul.
Thank you, Anita, and wish you all the very best for this game show that you are organizing in about half an hour.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who has joined us live, and I'm going to stop the live streaming now. Thank you.